It is thrilling to welcome you today. Isn't it a beautiful day? It's sunny. It's because of your smiles. My name is Denise Lucy. I'm a professor of business and the executive director of the Institute for Leadership Studies, and very, very proud to be a partner of Book Passage and Elaine and Bill Petrocelli, because they are the ones who bring these phenomenal talent to our community. And Dominican is a better place because of it. We've done this for 18 years now. 153 of the most famous thinkers and writers in America have been on this stage. Have you been here before? You have? And how many of you have been here before? Lovely. And how many will be coming on June 14th? Pretty good. All right. Well, the Institute for Leadership Studies is a leadership development center, and we seek to improve our students as well as our executive education programming that offers leadership and team development training, as well as academic programming for those who are earning a degree. And it's my honor to work in that institute. Pardon me. So Book Passage has been in town for, what do you say, 45-ish years? Oh my goodness. And what would we do without them? What would we do without them? They're really more of a community center, we say, rather than only a bookstore. And they teach language and all kinds of cooking books. So they don't cook, though. We need to have them cook. So it's just a great, great honor and privilege. And our program is supported by many friends, and the most tremendous friend to us for over many, many, many years is the Bank of Marin and the Women Leadership Philanthropy Council. What is that? That's a lot of words. Women Leadership Philanthropy Council. It is a women's giving circle at Dominican, and we are in a club, and those of us who are Dominican alums, Dominican staff, faculty, and community women donate each year, and we take those donations and we give that to develop our students' leadership. How many Women Leadership Philanthropy members do we have in the audience? They're up front, see that? You need to join up so you can get up front. Thank you, everybody. I'm a member too. And we want to thank you for your support today. Thank you for being our sponsor. Every single lecture, I just can't thank you enough to lead, collaborate, and contribute to our community. Our gold sponsor is Bank of Marin. Please give them your thanks with me. Thank you, Bank of Marin. Let's applaud. Because Bank of Marin has been part of our community for 30 years. They're a premier community bank founded right here in Marin County, and they provide commercial and personal banking support, as well as wealth management and trust services. They offer that to residents, businesses, and nonprofits here in Northern California. The bank's mission is to do good by doing well, going beyond its business model, extending to its community through these that they serve. Bank of Marin interests are to invest in local nonprofits through banking and lending services and sponsorships, in-kind and financial contributions. Through its charitable giving program, the bank donates 1% minimum each year of its pre-tax profit. Last year, they donated $1 million to our community. Thank you, Bank of Marin, for including our program among them. And I would like to introduce Angela Colombo. Angela Colombo is the Assistant Vice President for Community Engagement and Event Manager of Bank of Marin. Angela Colombo. Thank you, dear. You sit right next to your name.
Hi, everybody. Good afternoon. Thank you, Denise, for that lovely welcome. I appreciate it. I am thrilled beyond measure to introduce our speakers for this afternoon. Our distinguished speaker today, Laura Dern, is an award-winning actress, producer, and creator. She has received several accolades, an Academy Award, an Emmy, and 5 Golden Globe Awards. Dern is also a passionate environmentalist. Today, Dern will discuss her book, Honey Baby Mine, which she wrote with her mother, renowned actress Diane Ladd. And let me tell you, you are going to enjoy this so much. I had the pleasure of finishing it earlier this week. If you know a mother, if you are a mother, if you love a mother, you will find something to connect with in this book. It is beautiful and intimate and really, truly lovely. It's a deeply personal conversation, a compilation of their reflections with one another and revealing universal lessons. Today, Miss Dern will be in conversation with none other than Miss Zoë Elton, a British-born film curator, writer, and interviewer. Elton serves as the Director of Programming for our very own Mill Valley Film Festival, and her Mind the Gap initiative has established the festival as a leading voice on issues of gender equity in film. Yay! Please join me in welcoming Laura Dern and Zoë Elton to the stage.
Hey everyone. It's so great to be here.
Laura Dern, you wrote a book.
The last time I saw you, we were
yeah,
talking
you
about
made
a movie.
film, yes.
So happy to be here to talk about this journey.
It is a journey. Yeah, it is. I think with any book, with any story, you find those relatable moments. When you read a book, when you see a film, and then you find universal truths and you find insights that really tell us about the human condition. And you begin with a relatable moment that has to do with your mom getting a really serious diagnosis. So tell us a little bit about how that sort of happened. And she was basically confronted with, the ultimate. And yet, what did you do? You went for walks. So tell us a little bit about how that felt for you, how she navigated it, and what you felt you were really up against at the very beginning of this journey.
Well, just for a little background on the situation, my mother, Diane Ladd, who sends everyone her love, I'll be doing impersonations throughout the conversation because I hear her voice. I can tell them I send them light and love and to fulfill all their destinies with joy and love. I'm like, okay, Mom, I will tell them. But she unknowingly for 3 years plus in her own home was being sprayed with petrochemicals and pesticides by surrounding neighborhood homes and farms in her area of Southern California. And she had been getting very sick with a lung issue. We didn't know what was going on, and one morning her dog, that she wants everyone to know, is Ginger, her beloved dog, who was in the series Enlightened with us on HBO and was a great actress and an amazing dog who got to retire and come live with my mom. And she was very close to this dog, and one morning she went out, they had sprayed, she got the spray or what we thought was dew on her paws, and in my mother's arm had a massive seizure and died. And as tragic as it was also the gift of us discovering what was happening to my mother and ultimately helped save her life. So Mom, through double pneumonia and finally a diagnosis, which was this scarring of the lungs through exposure to pesticides, my mom was, or I was told, while my mom was sitting right there, your mother has 3 to 6 months to live. Just be gentle with her.
Wait a minute, so they said that to you, they directed it to you and not to your mother?
Yes. My mother also reminds me that is why they call it practicing medicine. And she would want you to know now, and not for me to save it to later, that it has been 3.5 years since we started this journey. And she would tell you that instead of dying, in 3.5 years, I made 2 movies, a TV series, and wrote a book with my daughter. So don't believe the doctors. And my mom always says, because her father said to her, as long as you have life, and as long as you have the ability to breathe, you keep living and you don't listen to anybody else. So when I asked, what can I do? There were no obvious medicines to help her. He said the only thing you can do to help expand her lung capacity is get her walking, which at this point, 10 steps was impossible. She was on oxygen, and it was very painful. And what can one do with a easily distracted storyteller, actress, mother, but get her talking? So we walked every morning. I moved her to where she was near ocean air for a few months, and we started these walks every morning. And I said, and I know she was really moved by it, that I was going to archive her stories in my phone for her grandchildren, because we really believed, this was it. And it was very powerful for us. And not at all was there an intention for it to be a book. It only evolved by it impacting us in such a major way, and then other loved ones of ours, that we were reminded we have to ask the questions in life. We weren't looking for apology, we weren't looking for forgiveness, but we were looking for the space where we held each other in honesty about our lives. And kind of amazing, because my mom and I are very close, that there was so much we had never talked about. The hardest of things and the most mundane.
Yeah, you push some buttons there in the book, which I love. It's really great. And you go through a lot of, several different topics. And you mentioned that you had no intention of creating a book initially. So at what point did you decide this was going to be a book? How did that happen?
I think I started sharing with people closest to me.
The actual recordings, or no?
No, I just sharing the experience.
Right.
And saying that Mom was getting better and stronger.
So you saw that fairly early on.
I did.
Yeah.
I did. And what was really remarkable was, as we started getting to even some of the most painful discussions, in which I was very scared to upset my mother or ask her things that were very difficult to face, as we started talking about them, she expressed feeling freed from years of holding heartbreak, grief, frustration about anything, from work life to personal family experiences. And when we started sharing this with loved ones, they started saying, oh, you know what? I asked my mother, I asked my brother, I went to my best friend and had the deepest conversation. And it was my agent, who's also a very dear friend, who said, it might be really special to share this with other people, because we're all needing this reminder. And for him, he'd lost a parent suddenly, and said, I never got to ask the questions, and I don't want to wait until it's too late in other relationships in my life. So this is encouraging me. It might be lovely to open up and see if it can encourage others. But we're also private people, and I'm also fiercely protective of my mom. So it was a bit of a dance to figure out how to do it, and we weren't going to do it and not be authentic. And it really, for us as actors, and hopefully you'll agree, versus writing a book or a memoir, it really for us felt like this one-act play journey that is truly the dialogue of these conversations.
Yeah, it's how long did you go on walks for? I mean, over what period of time?
It was 3 months.
Okay.
So there were many conversations, and we chose, intertwined a few, but we pretty much chose like key turning point conversations.
That's what I was going to ask you, because I read the 15 chapters in the book, and there's a beautiful arc to the book. I mean, I think the topics that you cover and the parts of your lives that you reveal and unpack also come almost like full circle by the time you get to the end. So, but I'm curious who actually got to choose which conversations you kept and which ones you didn't do.
Well, we really mutually worked on it very closely.
Would your mom say the same thing?
Yeah, she would, I swear.
Just checking.
And, there definitely were a couple of things where we said, I'm not going to share that.
Yeah.
But honestly, the only things we didn't share were when we felt like we were crossing over into someone else's business.
Right.
In a way that was inappropriate. Because we really talk about our relationship very openly.
You
And
do,
some
yeah.
of the hardest times. And to be clear, as example, we discuss the most painful moments of my mother's life and of mine. And yet, there is an argument. That was only an argument that we discuss in this book. And since we've had it, and we've looked at it, and we've edited it, it's become a massive fight between us. So just so you know, this didn't just heal everything, and we're this perfect example of what you should aspire to in a mother-daughter relationship. And if she were here, she would say she still knows she's right, and I will let you know, since she's not here, I think we all know I'm right. But my mom always asks for a vote with the people we've talked about. And the essence of the conversation was about the father of my son, of my children, and I being out of town, and my mom taking my 4-year-old son for a haircut without asking. It's ugly. And it's still ugly.
I can tell from the reaction that's another relatable moment.
Exactly. But it's funny how something that seems so subtle kind of opens up myriad wounds about not being heard or listened to or honoring or respecting. So you get into the depth of any intimate relationship.
Yeah, you do, and you get into the experience that each individual has of a given situation, and whether you're hearing what the other person's perspective is or not. See, I thought you were going to say that you'd kind of resolved that and it was all a thing of the past, but not, right?
We've resolved other seemingly far more painful and complicated things, but the haircut will never let
The haircut
go.
is...
But what was incredible, Zoe, and I've had the privilege of being at the most amazing festival, the Mill Valley Film Festival, and being interviewed by Zoe and listening to conversations that she's led with extraordinary artists and filmmakers. What's amazing to me in the years we've gotten to talk about film, being raised by people in film that I so love and admire, that it was only at this moment, and because I was afraid of losing my mother, I'm an actress, raised by an actress. I'd never asked her, what was the first movie you ever saw? What made you want to become an actor? How did you leave this tiny town in Mississippi with a veterinarian father and say, I'm out, with $25 in her pocket and a train ticket? Well, how did you do that? I had such a different experience than my mother, being raised in it, But I had never thought to ask some of the questions that you would think would be so easy. Or things like, what's your favorite color? We started asking the seemingly simple, easy questions at the beginning of our talks and walks. And it's just extraordinary how little we, in fact, do ask and therefore know with our deepest of relationships.
Yeah. Acting, though, when... as you say, as you recount where your mom came from, what you inherited was a working mother, was a working artist. And to be in that kind of situation, that was not her context at all. I mean, that's kind of amazing in and of itself. But I think the other thing that I find intriguing in the sort of trajectory of your conversations is that you're looking at several generations of people, your grandparents' generation, your mom's generation, yours and your kids. And there's both the family stories, but there's also the acting stories, which are personal. And then on top of that, there's sort of the film, like the history of film that we get into through, work that each of you has done, and then the way that that's influenced, everything. One of the things is that you've worked with your mom quite a lot. How is that?
I mean, it's
I could ask you a lot of different questions on that. Just
go
with that.
Yeah. It's incredible. And, and just to say, as you and I have discussed, I love film. And I love the people as artists. I love the people who I got, lucky enough to have as parents, as artists, because there is an ethos to a craftsperson. And my parents, who weren't raised in it, I think fell in love with the craft of acting and of storytelling, and they cared deeply about it. And they are workers, and they are disciplined and deep professionals and care so much about everyone they work with as a partner and collaborator. So I was raised in that energy from all that they learned, and that's extraordinary. There was nothing frilly about the way they work or what work means to them. It's not the glamour and illusion part of, film.
Yeah.
And my godmother, Shelley Winters, we talk about a lot in the book. It was the same with Shelley and many of my parents' friends. But then, you find yourself at 22, I think, 21, the first time I worked with my mother, which was David Lynch's film Wild at Heart. And, it's incredible I started working at 11, so I had already been a professional through childhood, very separate from my mom. So to stand alongside your parent doing what you love is so incredible. And we've had a few of these conversations only at this point talking about the book, but my mother is so shocked when her grandchildren have explained to her there's something called Nepo babies. She's like, she doesn't even understand how that's possible, because she said, I grew up going into our butcher in Meridian, Mississippi, and he was like, hey, my son's working with me today. And there's a very famous milliner in the French Quarter in New Orleans that my mom and I love. This amazing woman, Laura, also named Laura, and her daughter and her granddaughter also make hats with her, and it's a family business. She's like, how did this get defined like you're not supposed to be an actor or an artist or a filmmaker because your parent was, when the idea of standing alongside the next generation, if your child has that same vocation, interest, talent, is, for my mom, it's been so incredible. And for me, to not learn from watching, but learn through living in a scene with her has been incredible, incredible. And not to mention super free therapy, because our first movie we did together in David Lynch's film, she basically plays the Wicked Witch of the East and is like a monster mother figure. And then 2 years later, we made a film, Rambling Rose, which Martha Coolidge directed, and my mother plays a character named Mother, this archetypal, healing, loving, amazing gift of a mother figure who kind of takes me in as an orphan. And I unfortunately don't honor it and do horrible things. But anyway, that's aside the point. So we played it all out, and we did this show, Enlightened, that I mentioned before, starring Ginger the dog, and she's this withholding kind of impossible mother, and I'm a complicated, impossible daughter. And so how beautiful also to try out all these different human experiences together.
Were there any hurdles to having to, if you're rehearsing or if you're in a scene, is there, I'm going to say baggage, it's not really what I mean, but you understand what I mean. Is there baggage that you have to leave behind in order to be working with your mother in things that are, deep?
Not really at this age.
Right.
But in my early 20s, in a professional environment where, like in the movie, I'm supposed to be kind of sexy and cool with Nicolas Cage, and my mother's there all the time.
Oh, God.
It's super awkward. Let me just explain. And my mother is talking to me in front of what I've decided now is my community of people. Basically, I went to college with my mother. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
As another beloved friend of mine here, my hero Cheryl Strayed did with her mother, who I made join us, our extraordinary author and gift. Cheryl Strayed is hanging out here with us today. And I had the privilege of playing Cheryl's mother in the film Wild, where she and her mother actually did go to college together. So much like, as she wrote so brilliantly about, standing alongside my mom, but I'm a 21-year-old and she's giving me advice or telling me how to do it, or I'm just hoping she's going to like go away and not be around sometimes. Those were the painful parts. The acting was only incredible. And honestly, the more there is to work on. Working with a loved one, which I've done with, I get to do with Cheryl and with our beloved friend Reese Witherspoon, and I've had a few best friends that I end up acting with. It's an amazing experience, but with your mother, it's like
it's a whole different world,
it's extraordinary.
I would imagine. Yeah. It seems like you fell in love with acting very early on, and there's a reference you make in the book to Alice Doesn't Live Here Anymore, about two of the greatest scenes of women on film that you, in a conversation with your mom, you're mentioning, you talk about one scene and then and she says, well, what was the other? How old were you when you formed that opinion? I mean, had you, you're looking at this film, you're seeing these two scenes as being iconic for women on screen. How old, had you seen the film several times at that point? Was it a light bulb moment when you first saw it? How did that come about?
I was 6.5 when I was on set.
That's what I was thinking. So
and I fell in love completely.
With acting? Or just in love?
I think now that I'm sort of considering what it was that I fell in love with, I don't think I understood acting quite yet, or exactly how they did it, or it all seemed really magical, how they were taking on these characters and making something so true. But what I fell in love with to this day is my favorite part of getting to be an actor. I was watching the relationship between the actor and the filmmaker, the writer, the cinematographer, standing around this object being a film camera and finding the truth together, creating story together. I was watching 150 people, all with different abilities, come together to make one piece of art. Like that was so amazing to me. Even in a child brain, it's like you understand doing a drawing or singing a song. But this was something that all these people made together. And to watch specifically, one of the memories Zoe is referring to is a scene between my mother and Ellen Burstyn in a bathroom behind Mel's Diner, where they both were waitresses. And Martin Scorsese, who directed the film, wanted to capture it very privately. So, which is such a respectful choice, too. He put them in this bathroom. He cracked open the door, allowing the camera to see through it, but the crew's outside. So these two women are alone, and they start with the scene at hand, and then through the door, he starts feeding them ideas. Talk about this, talk about your necklace. What about that? Talk about your kid's teeth. Talk about, and just, they start riffing and improvising. And I had been there, and he pulled me over and let me kneel down and watch through the doorway, under the camera. So that was my, for sure, light bulb moment.
He not only made your mom feel safe, he made you feel safe too.
Oh, completely,
Yeah.
completely. And you know, valued as a witness to
Yeah,
something.
yeah.
And then he let me be an extra in a scene and was really supportive, and I think he saw in me just a real interest.
Yeah.
And I think that that idea has remained even through like childhood, and we've talked about this. Some of the, when I was lucky enough to have choices as an actor, you know, there were hard choices to make even in my teenage years. Work for no money in this tiny independent film, or go do this really popular Brat Pack movie or TV series that could have been great success. But it didn't have the thing I'd fallen in love with.
Yeah.
So it wasn't like a sacrifice or from ego, like I want to do real art or anything. It was the thing I knew that I loved.
Yeah.
And I feel really blessed.
It's great that you saw that. I feel like I want to put a pin in what you've just said, because I feel that whether I'm watching work, reading work, seeing work, or talking about it, what I feel I'm always looking for is that moment of truth. And for any artist of any type, there is something that happens sometimes. Not every time, but it has to do with that sum total of all those pieces coming together, and you know, boom, this is that moment, and this is the truth. And I love that you unpack it in the book, and I love what you've just said now. It's beautiful. Thank you.
Thank you. And I have to say, I think it's why I felt it was important to share Mom and I's journey. You know, we have loved acting together and acting the mother-daughter relationship in myriad ways, but the things I heard my mom say and the level of fear I had to ask her things that have defined my childhood, that were unspoken in our family, it just felt so sad to me. And it only came at this moment that I had enough bravery, because I believed I would lose her. And I'll never forget, my mom taught me so much in my own anxiety in life and the world the way it is now, that on our first walk, I said, hey, what if we pick a topic to talk about each day? Something that, you know, would be fun to talk about. And I had ideas of something silly to start with. I didn't want to bring up anything heavy. It was very hard for her to just breathe and walk, you know, to those stairs.
Yeah.
And I said, what should we talk about today? And I was thinking like recipes. And my mom goes, death. And what was incredible was she freed both of us. She was like, my daddy always said, you know, you got born, that happened, you didn't think about it, and you're gonna die too. You can bet your bottom boot on that. So why are we worrying about it? There's nothing we can do. Let's live while we can. And it was such a loving act, because instead of focusing on her own terror, she saw mine and wanted to free me of the constant worry that we had no control over. All we could do literally was take one step at a time. And that journey is what truly did, in fact, prolong her life, and did, in fact, bring us to these journeys we wanted to share, because they're just in the truth of all that we're carrying, the fear, the unspoken hurts, the wounds, the things we can't believe we never talked about. I mean, I am an only child raised by an only child single mom who went through a divorce with my father. And when I went through a divorce and my mother was with me through all of it, I never asked her about divorce. Why is that? Like, why was it I never said, is this supposed to be this painful? Or were you scared? Or how do you take care of your kids? What did you say? I don't even remember. I mean, I was very small. But it just was like, again, the unspoken,
It's also things that
buried thing.
It's the things that you witness as a child that you see potentially, you know, an action, or you hear the language, but you don't get the subtext necessarily, and you witness that. You know, you're such a witness to all of that, but you're not a part of it, and you're probably being protected from all of that. So it sounds like your mom really went to the place of pulling back the screen of that kind of protection?
She so deeply did in all ways, and very available and open and willing to hear. You know, we talked a lot about parenting, and she was willing to hear hard things, things that hurt me, and it was profound in that way. I asked her the other day, I said, was there anything that surprised you particularly that I was asking you as we're now talking about reflecting on our time? And she said, isn't it funny, with all my girlfriends and all my friends' stories, we all talk about how one day your child comes to you and says, why did you and mom, dad, same-sex couples, you know, your parent get a divorce or break up, or was there infidelity, or some of the harder things? And what surprised her was, I said, I have to know. What did you love about each other? Tell me how you fell in love. What were the love stories? And I think I was so afraid to ask anything positive because it ended hurtfully, and I was hearing fights over, you know, money and school pickups, and that as a kid you don't go, well, tell me something positive about my dad, or what made you laugh about mom, or, you know, the simple things. And that has been so beautiful to hear their stories, because of course, and I hope this happens if you all read the book, that it will inspire having the conversations with other friends and relatives, because don't think I then didn't go to my dad and say, okay, now mom has answered these questions, I need to know from you. And it's been so incredible in my relationship with my father.
Oh, fascinating. Yeah. There's a point in the book as well where I think it was your mom who says something, that there's no one else that sort of witnesses so much of what you share, you know, so that between you and your mother, especially in a single-parent family, you are each other's witnesses to all of this kind of stuff. And the fact that she drew back the veil with the stuff with your dad is great, but you also knew to ask those questions. And as somebody who doesn't have siblings, quite often it's the siblings who will be the witnesses. But you have actually created like a lifetime of siblings outside of your family. Talk about some of those relationships and how that has helped you both through life, but also, say, perhaps in the process of writing the book.
I'm excited to, and I only want to share this because it's in my head, the memory of when I one day fall in love. I just like, I want to be able to have at least, I want to have 2 children because I want my babies to have a sibling. I never had that, and they'll get to be, guys, I didn't know when you have a sibling, it means when I do something that frustrates my child, somebody else in the house goes, she's right, Mom, that was really not okay that you did that. So I'm like, I say to my mom, you have no idea how easy it was to only have one voice telling you what you did wrong. But back to the siblings, the gift of my life, truly. In the book, my mother and I discuss a lot a specific duo who is one of her best friends of her life. They met at the Actors Studio in New York, a great English playwright, Averill, and her daughter was 1 when I was 1 when they met, and they were both parenting on their own. And so they put us together, and Belina has been my sister since then. Thanks to our mother, just our mother's keeping us together through our whole childhood. And that's been such an incredible gift. But who knew, starting acting at 11, that I would collect sisters and relationships through working at a very young age, as I did a couple of, middle school friends who have remained with me through life, and I'm so blessed for that. I have Cheryl. I have, 6 incredible sisters through work that have become family to me, that we can talk about anything and walk through our hardest of moments together, or share celebratory times and co-parent together. You know, my mother relied, as she talks a lot about, on her girlfriends to talk to me about certain things or get advice. And now, you know, we get to do the same, which is extraordinary.
It is indeed. And one of the other topics that which is sort of related to what you were just saying, is love. I mean, love comes up all the time, you know, in the book, whether it's just within the family or whether it's falling in love. Your mom at one point says, in a fight, you know, you won't be able to read my writing. Maybe you could just, in a fight between emotions and logic, emotions win every time. Could you say that like your mom, please?
In a fight between emotions and logic, emotion wins every time. And it's true. Particularly for, as she would tell you, my Sagittarian mother. She always, I think, blames her emotions on being a Sagittarius. But I don't know if it's all that. But she definitely feels it all deeply. And you know, when you're raising a teenage daughter, she's going to feel it all and match you. And her, as we talk about a great deal in the book, her cohort, her partner in crime, her gift from God, her mother, my grandma Mary, who raised me alongside my mom, also would have emotions win every time. And this 5'1" little proper Catholic Mobile, Alabama lady, forget it. You do not want to cross her. We were both terrified of her if we were in trouble. And she also was, you know, the most full of life and full of love person, you know, anyone could ever meet. And as we, you know, subtitle the book, she made the greatest, meanest banana pudding anybody's ever had in their life. And was truly my gift, particularly with parents who were working and a mom who had to work as Zoe, as such a champion for gender equity in all places, but particularly in our industry, knows so deeply. When my mom was raising me, you could never bring your child to work. It was almost impossible, thanks to Scorsese being one of maybe 2 filmmakers who made it an environment where mom could have me there. And you didn't have a babysitter or a nanny, or if you're lucky, your sibling, so thank God she had, you know, my grandmother to help her. But it was a fight, and we talk about that a lot, you know, the fight to do your work and hold down jobs and make a living and raise kids on your own is, you know,
it's huge.
It's
huge. And the other topic that comes up, you know, in relation to that is, I mean, you mentioned Martha Coolidge when you made Rambling Rose, bringing her kid, having breastfeeding on set, and being told what?
Yes, our director of our film, a very beloved director at this point and very respected in her career, a producer came over to her. We'd started the film and she had a newborn baby boy. And she was nursing, by the way, with a blanket on set to the side while they were setting up another scene. And the producer came over and said, "You need to go to the trailer to do that because you're going to lose your crew and they're not going to respect you. It's going to look like a sign of weakness." Ugh. Weakness.
Yeah.
To feed a human being.
Because the crew was probably
I'm glad your mother didn't think that about you, sir. But glad you got fed somehow. It's just incredible. And thank God there have been shifts.
There have been shifts, but do you think that there are defining moments in your work as an actor that have, you know, that are light bulb moments that have made a difference to what you would ask for as an actor on set or that kind of thing?
1,000,000%. And I would say only in the last 10 years.
Yeah.
You know, I would never ask before. And when I had babies and I got a job, I was panicked because I knew what it felt like to be left at home when your parent worked. Even, again, back to the emotions versus logic, even if you understood the logic of your mother needing to go do her job. And I was incredibly proud of her work. Still, it's heartbreaking, and you miss them. And so it was very upsetting to me. And you just couldn't. And then I started working with other women and a few wonderfully kind champion men in positions of power. And in both cases, suddenly there was room to talk about raising children in your workplace environment, to bring your child, to need to scramble to take care of your child in between your workday. All of those things have shifted dramatically. I remember my son was a baby, and my dear friend Julianne Moore's son was a baby, and we were both doing a movie together, and we were not having the space and the freedom we needed. So we both chipped in and paid for a dressing room, like a little mini honey wagon trailer, to create like a little nursery space for the babies. And it changed everything. And my ex was there and took care of them some of the time, and then her husband was there and took care of them some of the time, and we could go in between scenes. And I was like, oh my God, this only happened because I have a sister on set in the same circumstance. And we paid for it because no one was doing it for us. But since then, and thanks to pioneers like the amazing Lucille Ball, who, when being a studio executive and studio boss at Desilu, was the first person, if you don't know, to create childcare and add a studio lot for employees. So it took a woman in a position of power to go, we're bringing the kids, and we're feeding them, and they're playing. So we got to figure this out. So it's been extraordinary to work alongside people who are considering it from the get-go, and you don't even have to ask.
Yeah, that's great. And I'm seeing the time, and I would love to open to audience questions. What do you do to ensure your own resilience when you're also taking care of other people?
I mean, if you have a list of recommendations, I feel like if you're asking, maybe you know the answer. I don't have it. I practice TM, meditation, which I am not consistent enough when things are hard. I practice yoga and barely do it when things are hard. You know, when they tell you, and especially when things are hard, this is when you really need it, it never happens. We don't eat, we forget to exercise, but, walking and being with dear friends, talking out frustrations, because I realize I'm in a time in my life that is a shared experience for many, which is teenagers and elder parents. Guys, what is going on? How did no one prepare any of us for this moment? I'm a wreck. So anyway, if you want to write me any advice, I would love it, because I'm trying to remind myself. And amazing that my favorite champion to remind me to take care of myself is my mom, who I get to stand alongside at these moments. She asked, how has this opened up my own relationship with my children? And what I've loved to watch is, by going through this journey, my children became much closer to my mom, both because of her health crisis, but also because they saw my investment. And I think they started asking more questions to her and of me. But one of my favorite things, when I shared the compilation with my kids to make sure they were comfortable with the stories and photos that are shared, my son finished it and he was like, oh my God, I can't believe when Jaya went through that hard time, I thought, okay, just don't talk about it because that might upset her more. I was the older brother, I should have said, how are you? How does this feel for you? And so in hindsight then, he apologized to her for not asking more and asked her more about this specific time period she'd gone through. And that moved me so much. And so I think it really has, as example, opened up for us more dialogue. And I hope in my friendships, even though they're incredibly honest, more digging into asking the second and the third and the follow-up question, not just the first question. That's been a great lesson for me. Thank you.
I think oftentimes when we have these conversations with our parents, it usually happens when they're a bit older, but there's also a somewhat of a guilt in choosing to ask these questions, because it almost feels like perhaps like you're pressing on a wound and you don't want to cause them more pain. So I just want to know, how did you navigate that to be able to ask those tough questions with your mom while she was in a period of pain? And even regardless, it's just tough to ask them those questions.
Yes, thank you for the question, and I hope you'll read the book, because I talk about it very openly, how I'm particularly afraid to bring up the hardest, most painful things my mother went through, a very specific tragedy she went through of losing a child before me, and it was never spoken about. And so I talk a lot about even preceding us getting there, like, I don't know how to bring it up. She's too weak. She's too fragile, and very clearly don't want to do it. And something evolves that sort of allows the space to have the conversation. And you can feel how nervous I was about it and how emotional it was for my mom to discuss it. But from that place, my mom, in our conversations in the book, talks about how her lungs started feeling better within days of the conversations, and how much grief she thinks she was holding on to and just not letting herself access because it was just too painful to, quote, go there. And she personally feels that it wasn't just emotionally freeing, that it was profoundly healing physically to talk about some of those hardest things. So that was the lesson I took from it, right? To not be afraid to ask. I mean, especially she was so delicate. And in the trajectory of the story, you see that I wait until much later in our walks when she's getting a little bit stronger, and it organically sort of happens, that we actually end up kind of walking by my childhood street. It's so weird. It's almost...
You didn't choose that?
No.
Oh, wow.
It's very beautiful to me that it happened all that way, but it gave me space to ask what I was so afraid to ask. Thank you.
And you kept pushing for her to stay there and to go there as well, to your credit. Yeah.
Yeah, she wanted to stop, but I could see this need, this longing and resistance and even frustration with me at one point. So it definitely is a respectful dance. And there's a gentleman I met, we were just in New York, and a friend I've met through work, and he was doing a piece about the book, and I only know him, very professionally. And we had this conversation as he was writing a piece about it, and he said, "Can I speak to you privately?" Which is sort of not what would happen. I'm interviewing you, And he shared a very beautiful story. I'll only share because it moved me so much, and I just heard it this last week, that he was doing the piece, and he had to listen to some excerpts on audio, and then he took his book with him to finish the piece as he got a call from his mother that his grandmother was dying. And he went to this southern town to see his grandmother as a very comfortably in his world of New York City, out in love gay man in his early 40s. And his grandmother is very religious, and he had never come out to her. And he decided that she was too sick, it would be too poisonous, right, for her, and that he would just have to live in the shame that was part of his story, but with his friends and in his community, live a joyful life. And he read the book and finished the book on the plane, and he said that when he got there, he knew he had to tell her. and that his mother went with him, and he knew it would be hard, and he knew she would be resistant, but he would have done it, and that it was in the doing that was important. And he sat by her bed and held her hand and told her that he was gay. And she's, I believe, in her early 80s. And he said she looked in his eyes and said, well, God made you just as you are, which means you're perfect and beautiful to me. And she passed, I think, within days of that. And he said the freeing that it gave him. And he said, honestly, that was extraordinary, but if I hadn't gotten that response, it also would have been freeing to have told and not hid with some shame inside myself that I wasn't allowed to tell. So he was such an inspiration to me to go even further. My poor mother. I'm like, guess what we didn't cover?
I knew it was going to be great, but I feel like I've just had some life-changing experience. Now I have to be a bookseller and suggest that you may know 30 more people who need Honey Baby Mine. And we also have a couple of large print books, and if you decide you want an audio, the Book Passage staff will help you make that happen too. I am so appreciative of the two of you, of Jimmy Franco, for making all this happen, and I don't think we'll ever forget this day. Thank you.